Hey, what's going on? My name's Anthony Cintron. I'm a product strategist and consultant. I build products that customers want without wasting time on things that they don't. I will walk you through on how to process customer feedback and how to convert that feedback into a prioritized backlog as well as a roadmap. Enjoy.
We'll get right into it, okay? All right, so I'm using Product Board. Product Board is a pretty cool tool. I've been using it for a couple of years now. It works great. So there you can actually see it's really simple. There are four sections here, which really match key areas within a product development cycle, right? Specifically when you're trying to prioritize features. Just one thing to mention, I am not discussing bugs here. I'm only talking about solutions, ideas, feedback coming from your buyer or your peers. And so you see that there are four sections here. The first one starts with insights. That's where you actually drop all of that feedback into one inbox, and then you set up a frequent cadence to actually sift through that information, highlight what's important, and start pushing that important stuff into the prioritized list. The next section is actually your feature list. That's where you spent most of your time with your team prioritizing, setting the value to each of those features. And then you have the roadmap. The roadmap is where you can actually work with your team on feature planning. Really works well. You can create different types depending on the audience. So you can create one that's super high level for board members, or you can choose to create something a little bit more granular that will help you really kind of plan those more short term iterations. And then here you have Portal. A lot of companies, at least that I know, don't like to use this, but this particular client, my partners at Parakeeto, they actually use this portal to engage with their customers. So customers will actually provide their perspective on existing features that have already been, generally speaking, vetted, and there has been some discovery during or around that feature. Really quickly, so going through Insight, as you can see here, it's just a data dump. It's a data dump coming from Slack, coming from emails, coming from sales. I can choose one here. Perhaps it's from a demo call. This has a lot of notes in it. I select some of these items that I feel should be associated to an existing feature, or I end up creating a new feature idea. Another's alternative solution, which I typically do when there's a video associated to that demo or to that interview, I inevitably descript it. I use this tool called Descript to then transcode that video, which makes it easy for me to search through. Again, I use a cadence. I personally look at grooming this backlog on a weekly basis. And so once you're done with processing those features, you want to then put them, in particular groups, classify them, organize them based on modules, components, however you like. Initially, we did it based on just value, and so yeah, however you want to design the schema of this is entirely up to you. I decided to try to match it to the actual modules or visual components that are actually on the interface in the application. So once we get these features in here, we have a list. We're going to want to start ranking and associating these list items to releases and strategic objectives. And so that's what we did here. I'll go through how we have it set up. Obviously, you can design it however you like. Perhaps I'll give you some additional color around the decision behind some of these attributes and why we consider them important and what do they actually mean. So as you can see here, we have user impact score. User impact score is ultimately a representation of the users that provided feedback and a value to it. And so prioritization score is it's our way of adding weight to particular important objectives, releases, or strategic drivers. In our case, we have strategic drivers. And so these are our strategic drivers that we are currently focusing on. And so we pretty much allocated, emphasis on some drivers more so than others. In this case, we want to improve our conversion rate. So we want to be able to convert, those that are interested into those that actually are committed to using the product. And so releases are obviously really important. In our case, we had broken it down into 4 different releases. The team went through a process of defining goals and objectives. There's a method to do that quite efficiently. Maybe at some time I create a video for that. But yeah, so these are the releases that we ended up creating, and that matched our timeline that we shared with our stakeholders. And so in our case, our first release was actually the beta, actually getting that beta out the door. And so we naturally associated metrics to this release. I find that extremely important, to make sure that releases have measurable objectives, even if it's to set a baseline metric. And then we have activate and onboard accounts, 20 accounts. So this is after beta release. And then we want to be able to, at some point, exceed our product monthly active user metrics. We're using that term loosely, but we have different, it's not really a monthly active user metric. We're just using that term. But we do have specific metrics that we're defining, that we're working towards as a team, and the product is obviously should be a reflection of that. So we move on into objectives. Objectives are, typically high level product objectives, sure, but they correlate or should be easily translatable to a business objective. In our case, these are the ones that we considered really important as of right now, because we started with a new idea, and with new ideas versus more mature solutions, your objectives are very different. And so these objectives match a very early solution in hopes to convert it to a product. Another important objective is improving the onboarding experience. In our case, we would like to increase volume of usage during a set time period. Increase the product value. I would think that every product should have this as an objective. In our case, we broke that down into 3. So that means increasing the value of the product as a whole, increasing the speed with which a user can get value from the product, or both. And so just quickly here, we don't have any timeline set in specifically for these particular objectives, because we set our timeline against releases. You'll also notice that you can view features here that are related to this particular objective. And you could even see the priority of them as well, and effort. Increase product stickiness. In our case, user finds it hard to turn off product, and it decreases churn rate. And so these are the key objectives and releases that were considered important and critical to the business, and therefore we needed to ensure that the product reflected that as well. But there are additional features that Product Board offers, which I find extremely interesting, and that these are strategic drivers. In our case, we have improves conversions, improves user confidence, and drives repeat usage as well as X factor. So yeah, these drivers, I'd love to go through them, but I'm sure you can get the gist of what they really mean. As you can see, we rank and rate them in terms of from barely impactful to extremely impactful. And just going back to the objectives here, we we assign value as well, but also effort and priority. And all of these impact your overall prioritization. And I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. Actually, I can show you right now. One thing to point out here, in our case, we had one product line and we had a technology track. I'm a firm believer that technology development should be in parallel to product enhancements and new user experience improvements. So, and technology operations ultimately means systems that have been designed before. It's very low risk. There are a lot of assumptions validated, and it's clear what needs to be built. So there is a specification defined in some way, and it's not an end user experience. It's not in relation to an end user experience. So yeah, I just try to make sure that I divide the two. We don't set value or rank those items. They are typically linked to releases and maybe objectives, but really they're there to support the underpinnings of what a user experience or a new solution is solving for. And so this feature also allows me to filter between different types of views of the prioritized list. And this one is pretty helpful because you can then see how they are ranked and which ones you should be reviewing first. Typically, we jump to the bottom and we look at the new items on a weekly basis to see which ones need to be reviewed by the team, meaning ranked, rated, and prioritized. And from there, we look at what has been done versus what could be a new candidate versus what's in progress. And so just a little bit about these different statuses. They're slightly different than product board. So in this case, needs review. These are just new ideas that haven't really moved the needle. They're just not. They're either ranked really low or they're not relevant. I don't put an influx of features and ideas in here without extracting it from a end user's perspective. So I don't go in and audit the application and say, okay, these are the things that we need to do. We don't do that. We save those discussions when there's a specific feature that is set to candidate. So these are the items that we decided that we would then begin a solution design series. And so these grooming discussions, we look at which candidates are up and coming and what questions do we have in relation to them that we may need to answer prior to actually conducting a solution design series. And so a solution design series is a series of meetings that allow us to apply design thinking methods to solve a particular problem. And so those particular sessions are under the status discovery. And discovery is ultimately that we're either conducting user research from a technical side, we're probably running a spike, and so there in any way there's research being done at that time, And so once the solution design series has been completed and we've conducted some preliminary user interviews to validate some general assumptions, we then put that particular feature into planning. And that's when we hand it over to engineering to begin their poker planning, their sprint planning, and really breaking those ideas and solutions, which are ultimately dynamic specifications created by the team over a period of time. The engineers will break that into technical tasks and they begin their sprint iterations. And so that's when we move those items. Once they actually go into in progress on the development side, we set them to an in progress state. And then staging and the others, I think they pretty much speak for themselves. And so once you're all done prioritizing your features and selecting which ones you want to work on, you want to then plan, do a roadmap planning session. That means updating just your roadmap based on what's been done on the development side, as well as what's been recently prioritized in the backlog. And again, I'm not talking about issues. I'm not talking about bugs. Defects are pushed, defects that have been explicitly identified by an end user must go directly into the defect process, the issue and bug defect process and procedure, which is a very different track. In our case, what we did was we created a 6-month roadmap and we broke down our releases into 1, 2, 3, 4. And so each release is a build up from the last release up until the end when we have our official release to the general public. But along the way, we are prioritizing and updating our metrics. And so here is the public portal. For this particular product, we share only user experience solutions to our early adopter community. And so we don't share any kind of technical stuff like login, development, administrative stuff. They should be solution oriented that relates to the user's experience. And so the discovery items are the items that are new candidates that are considered up and coming for a solution design series. And here under planning, usually it's assumed that this solution is in its post solution design. It's been approved to go into development, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the developers are working on it. And then the rest kind of are self-explanatory. In development, meaning the feature is actually in development. What I like about this feature in Product Board is that it allows you to update users whenever there are changes. You can get votes. You can actually view insights, and you can easily share it with others. Very, very, very cool tool. Very awesome. But most importantly, I wanted to show you the steps that I take in using Product Board, but in terms of just generally speaking, how I take ideas, convert those ideas into solutions, work with the team to prioritize those solutions. When you prioritize those solutions, there's a lot of information that's readily available. So sometimes it could be information overload. However, what Product Board does, it offers this really cool prioritization matrix in a very interactive way, where as long as you agree on the accuracy of the drivers as well as objectives and the releases, and you set down the foundation, you should be able to easily come and update these items on a daily basis. And over time, depending on the frequency that you're doing it with your team, your accuracy will actually improve. So this is a great tool to evolve with how the product is evolving as well. Well, again, my name is Anthony Cintron. Hopefully that was very helpful. I went through a lot there, and if you have any questions about anything related to the product development process or product board, feel free to send me a message. I'm more than happy to respond. Hopefully this was helpful. Thank you.